Good morning to you from Brentham Graveyard. I was thinking as I was looking at these graves this morning that all these people have had their time. They've had their lives and they've gone to wherever they've been designated to go. And of course, that's a place where we in a way send ourselves, whether it's to God or not to God. And those, of course, that have gone on to be with Jesus don't have to face what we have to face in the coming days. And I was thinking about that last night and preparing something to talk about with you. And I want to share a scenario when I get back to the car. It's not a nice scenario, but I believe it's important that we take note. Talk to you in a minute. Good morning to you from my car. I'm sitting here in the graveyard and it's very quiet here this morning. And I was sitting in a quiet place last night. I was actually outside the supermarket. I often don't like to go in when my wife is shopping. So what I tend to do sometimes is I park up and sometimes I sit preparing these messages and all sorts of things. But last night, I was sitting and facing the entrance of the supermarket where my wife was, and there's an ATM, one of these cash machines, which we're all familiar with. But on the front of the cash machine, there was a sign, and it said, "No cash." And I began to look at this, and I began to think to myself, what would life be like with no cash? And a scenario came into my head. So I've jotted something down here that I'm going to read to you. It's very imperfect. It's just an idea, basically. So please don't have a go at me for the lack of detail. I'm sure you can add things to it, which could be quite enjoyable, actually. I say enjoyable, but interesting at least. So I'm going to read to you what I've got here. And just want to paint this picture for you. It's January 1st, 2027. Cash is suddenly cancelled. 7 days from today, no previous warning has been given. All notes must be handed in at the bank by the 7th of January. You will receive a digital credit, whether you have a bank account or not. If you haven't one, it will be opened immediately for you. At the bank, you will be given a time and a date to attend a chip implant session by government order. You will be issued with a social credit score according to how you have behaved personally over the past 2 years. You as a Christian have been screened and found to be very vocal on social media and mixing with agitators of the state. And you haven't been monitoring your carbon footprint. Your social credit score will not permit you to leave the zoned area that we will designate for you. Your digital wallet will only work within that restricted zone. Access to further credit has been denied, and a blacklist of names and addresses of friends and family that you have mixed with will be given to you, and you will no longer be able to visit them. You will be under a curfew from 10 p.m. to 7 p.m. every day, and all of your activities will be continually monitored. You will put in a report once a week to the Department of Screening. So this is now your life. Obviously, I've missed out a lot of detail, and I'm really just trying to paint a picture of a sudden and dramatic change that could come upon you in your life. And it does happen, doesn't it? Sudden and dramatic change. And how are you going to respond to something? Who are you going to turn to if something like that happened? Imagine how the Jewish people felt in Nazi Germany. One day they heard the footsteps stomping up into their apartments, and suddenly these jackbooted officers walked in and said, "That's it, you're being taken to be resettled. You're going to be, first of all, taken perhaps to a ghetto, like the Jews were, the Warsaw Ghetto. They had no choice. All they could do was take the belongings in a suitcase and leave everything behind. But in a scenario like this, it's not as though you've been taken out, but your life has been cut off. You've been estranged from society. You're no longer one of them. And where do you go from there? Well, one thing is for sure. You're going to need immediate comfort. You're going to need immediate strength, aren't you? You're going to have to turn to something in your life that's bigger than you if you can't reach out to another person. And of course, for us as Christians, it can only be God himself. Job 19, verse 13, seems to speak of this. And it says here, "He hath put my brethren far from me, and mine acquaintance are verily estranged from me." Job knew what it was to experience sudden and dramatic change in his life. Of course, for Job it was sudden destruction. But for this situation, can you imagine a vast digital prison where your movements are tracked and monitored and controlled? You can only meet with certain people. Your bank accounts are restricted. And maybe for a time you can still use the supermarket. But then there may come a point, who knows, once the implant's done, for all the other people, they say you can use the supermarket, but you can't because you don't have the implant. Maybe you'll be put into a compound. One can scenario this all day. But the important thing is, how would we respond? 1 Thessalonians 5:3 illustrates this further. "But of the times and the seasons, brethren, ye have no need that I write unto you. For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape." And the sudden destruction that will come upon our lives when this digital prison is set up. In a way, it's a bit of a mock-up, isn't it, compared to a bit of a sort of a sort of a pre-run, in a sense, of what God's going to do when he does actually judge his enemies. But the important thing to know is that even if we're left estranged from whoever, whether it be family or friends or whatever, our God will never leave us. And that's the encouraging thing about all this. And I just want to read 3 encouraging scriptures to you here, just to end this off. I'm not saying that scenario is correct or it's going to work out like that, but all I'm saying is that we need to be prepared for sudden change, for sudden dramatic change that could come about at any time. If there was a nuclear weapon dropped, we would have to cope with that change. And so God wants to prepare us for any situation that can occur. And I believe that is vital for us in these last days. Malachi 3:6 that says this. Malachi 3:6. "For I, the Lord, do not change. Therefore you, O children of Jacob, are not consumed." God doesn't change. We know what men are like. We know how men can change and how they constantly, let's say at the moment we're seeing it, aren't we? Constant change of leaders, people not knowing which direction to go in. But yet at the back of it, the enemy's working. He's working to bring about his plans. But God says, I do not change. And we can be comforted in that. James 1:2-4 says this, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing." So you might end up lacking in all the world's goods, and we might end up as chaste vagabonds. But God says, count it all joy. We will meet trials of various kinds, and we don't yet know what they are, though we might have an inkling, especially when we start thinking about Revelation 13 and the day when there is no more cash, the day when you either have that mark or you don't have it. One more scripture here, Revelation 21 verse 1, and this is the glorious hope, isn't it, for all of us eventually. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. What a great hope that we have. But yet, first of all, we need to be prepared. We don't know how things are going to go in the long-term future. But we know in the immediate future things are changing rapidly. And it's important for us to be able to keep pace, and to keep pace with what God wants for us as well. That's a nasty, horrible scenario, isn't it, to have to face? But we don't know exactly how it's going to pan out. But we do know one thing, that God is with us. So I'll leave you with that thought today, and maybe you can add to that scenario, and we can think about it a bit more in future videos, especially as things start to get revealed. We're seeing all sorts of changes now too in the Middle East. Benjamin Netanyahu is back in power, and all these things going on. There are now movements on the Temple Mount, many more Jews going up there to pray. We've heard about the red heifers. Everything seems to be coming into place, doesn't it, on both our side, our Christian side, and on the other side, on the world side. And we're starting to see an imminent clash developing. So let's be prepared for whatever's coming. But let's also live just one day at a time. And today is the day that the Lord has made. And let us rejoice and be glad in it.